What would happen if you played an entire football game where both teams knew what play was coming? I think we're about to find out on Saturday. This is a Locked On Baylor, Locked On Horned Frogs crossover.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Baylor, Locked On Horned Frogs crossover, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Also with me, my good pal, and you could also say from ESPN Central Texas, the great Steven Simcox of Locked On Horned Frogs. Happy Halloween to everyone. Steven, you got big Halloween plans tonight with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, we're taking the kids around to do the trick-or-treating bit, so that'll be good, but not really anything other than that. Do you have anything, Cam? Do you have a big party? Anything planned for All Hallows Eve?
No. This is going to be a chill night, hopefully. But, I mean, let's talk about Baylor TCU. And I'm sorry, Steven. I think someone has hacked into our encrypted podcast here. We need to go to the backup server. We need to get this thing crypted as heck. Why don't we start there? Let's do it, there? Yeah. Baylor and TCU expressly named in this Max Olson story yesterday that the Texas Tech athletic director, Kirby Hocutt, has a problem with this coach-to-player comm system in the helmets that's new to college football this year. There is a way that you can hack into this. And he expressly says to the Big 12, we need to investigate that Baylor game and that TCU game because we lost those games, and I think there might be something up. The whole thing I'm getting from this, Steven, is they could have cheated here. We need to check that. The games we won, which also teams could have cheated in, either one. No, let's ignore those. But since we lost these two, I'd like these to get checked out.
Yeah, I like that Tech is like, we lost 2 games in a row. This has never happened before. Like, let's go to the tape. Let's get a law firm involved. There's been no signs this year, whether it was barely beating ACU or losing to Wazoo, that would, maybe indicate that this team isn't great each and every week. I don't really understand where this is coming from, other than I guess some realization was made these frequencies are available and able to be hacked. Like, we have the technology to do it. And I like that Jeremiah Donati basically just sent off what I imagine is a generic email that every college administrator has, which is, I will cooperate with any investigation. Like, if there's an investigation, we'll cooperate. So we don't think we have any wrongdoing, but if we did do anything, we'll, tell the truth. So yeah, Cam, it sounds like, as shocking as it could be, Joe McGuire might have lost 2 games in a row by just normal means and not espionage.
Copy, paste. We have integrity. We hear you, and we will cooperate to the fullest extent. Send tweet, send email, send DM. Like, it's golden. And Mac Rhodes basically does the same thing. They could have both come out and just been like, anyone else think this is ridiculous? Like, anybody here? But no, I mean, this is, I tried to like pussyfoot around this a little bit when I was doing the emergency episode I did last night. And it was like, what do I call this? Is this a cheating accusation? And it kind of is. It's a cheating accusation. They picked out these 2 games and said these things can be hacked, and these are the games that we want to look at. I'm trying to think of a good analogy for it. It's like, yeah, you could do anything, but it's like if you get in a car accident and it might be your fault, and you're like, well, they could have been driving drunk.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no. I mean, it was the middle of the day. It was a 18-year-old driving home from high school. No. But I'd like you to check it anyway. That's what it's screaming to me. It's just like, this could have happened. So I don't know. It's new technology. So this is the time they could throw it out there. And now all the schools need to send all their technology back, get a software update, and get it back for Saturday when the Bears will take on the Horned Frogs. And Steven, it takes away from a really good matchup, because what we have and you texted me right after our game went final, which was right after the TCU game went final on Saturday, saying, are these two of the hottest teams in America facing off at McLean Stadium this Saturday? Your answer?
I think they got to be in the conversation, Cam. I mean, two programs that looked about as dead in the water as you possibly could. Well, I'll speak for myself first. I don't know. I know Baylor lost to some good teams, and there were some promising things around those losses. I know for TCU, when they lost to Houston at home, it felt like, okay, this is the rock bottom of all the rock bottoms, and maybe we're talking about a coaching change, exit, all those things. And they've suddenly, coming off the bye week, I mean, they beat a Utah team that was obviously kind of handicapped without their quarterback and Isaac Wilson, and don't really know what all is going on there. But then they beat Tech at home, and suddenly it's like, hey, everything's fine. We're all good. You know, we're here. We're ready to rock and roll. We could go 8-4 or 9-3, which is kind of what we thought before the season anyway. So it could just mask all our problems, right? Like we'll just kind of keep turning the ball over and eating bad food, but somehow we're kind of maintaining a healthy weight, which is a great thing that we're excited about.
Yes.
And yeah, Baylor, like Dave Aranda, for the first time in a while, it feels like he's got some juice. He looks kind of like this year. He looks kind of like an algebra teacher that also takes MMA classes. He looks very intimidating out there with the bald head. He's got it rolling. The defense is playing better. Sawyer Robertson's been a revelation. So I was saying this week, Cam, this rivalry has been weird in the last decade. One, because so much of the juice around it, aside from the teams being good in that span of like 2013 to 2016, 2015, was because the two coaches hated each other so much. And Art Browse and Gary Patterson. Both of them are gone. Both schools are finding ways to try to honor those teams without actually honoring those teams because there's some weird stuff going on behind the scenes. That being said, I made the proposition, is this the moment where maybe we kind of get back to, there was a time where this was sort of the game in the Big 12. Like this was the one that everybody circled and was like, that's going to have conference title implications. It's the game you want to watch on Thanksgiving. If you were going to put like what games are we on Thanksgiving weekend, this is going to be it. Are we getting back to that, Cam? Do you feel like these two teams are finally kind of on an upswing at the same time?
It's a great point because I think it's maybe the most intriguing matchup since those great teams of 13, 15. 2021 had a ton of intrigue because Baylor was really good and TCU had just fired Gary, so there was something to that. But this feels like, and I was talking about this with Sydney Wicker on my show yesterday. It's like obviously the best kind of rivalry game is kind of that Michigan-Ohio State winners going to the playoff, right? Last week of the season, but I think there's something really cool about this scenario of two teams who are not going to the college football playoff. They're not winning the conference title, but they're both good now. They have turned it up, and they're good and they're exciting, and they are both looking for to continue on with serious momentum. I think that's really fun, and I think this is going to. And the intrigue for me comes with all of those things, and the fact that those could produce some of the hatred again. I don't think Sonny Dykes and Dave Aranda are going to hate each other like the head coaches did, but to really put some venom back in this rivalry of we both need this win to keep things going. We have both fan bases have finally turned the corner and are feeling good about their football program again, not just this year, but going forward. Both these teams in the top 3 of the 2025 recruiting class of the Big 12. So there is a ton behind this, I think. And yeah, that's a good point, Steven, is that it's going to be a while before it's the Patterson-Briles mid-2010s ever again. That is such an anomaly in the history of Baylor TCU, right? There's a ton of symmetry there, which is what makes it a great rivalry, I think. And I think there's legitimate hatred from fan bases. I do believe that. But to have those two at the top of their game, that's an anomaly. That comes once a generation, probably. But this is certainly a fun-looking matchup. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you're going to be able to check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on that same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. One of the things I think that's pretty fun about it, before we talk about these coaches in particular, is what you mentioned in there, is the celebrations going on and that have gone on. So Baylor will honor their 2013-14 Big 12 championship teams this weekend. Art Briles will not be a part of it. The only coach that will have been a part of it is on the sideline for TCU. Art's son will be kind of, I guess, looking on weirdly as those teams get honored. I know TCU tried to honor the 2014 team, one of the great second-place teams in college football history. Now, Steven, did they try to do something? I'm trying to get this straight. Did they do something on the field, or did they try to do something on the field and it kind of wasn't there with the whole Boykin thing? And I know Gary did something in the parking lot. Take me through that.
Yes, the co-champions were honored unofficially. Head-to-head does not matter except in 8 of the last 9 years. Well, it doesn't matter.
Vice champions, in case the champions died.
No. You were co-champions. Yeah. Head-to-head doesn't matter except in 8 of the last 9 years when TCU has won this ball game. But
now it matters. Okay, fine.
Yes. It's a double standard, and it's one I'm comfortable with. So the Alumni Association did like a tailgate for the 2014 team. And the thing that I don't get, it seems, I don't know if this was miscommunication, but for whatever reason, members of the 2014 team thought that they were going to get honored on the field. Like there was going to be some sort of, at the end of the first quarter, let's send everybody out there and do a wave.
Wave to the crowd.
Give a standing ovation, that whole thing. When they found out that wasn't happening, there were some guys on the team that were like, what's going on? That's arguably, in my opinion, I think it's the best team in TCU history. 2010 has a place.
Great ending, great happy ending. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Final ranking. Yeah,
that's right. I believe that for whatever reason that kind of got lost in the shuffle here. And so Mac Engel from 4-Star Telegram wrote an article saying that, yes, this was an intentional snub, if you want to call it that, and it was around one. Gary Patterson, there's still some frosty feelings there between him and the athletic department, and then also Trayvon Boykin and his kind of legal troubles since he left TCU and some legal troubles while he was there, specifically, getting arrested for domestic assault when he was in the NFL. All that led to them saying, you know what, we can't really do this officially. The athletic department hasn't said anything about that. They haven't come out and been like, hey, that's actually, this was just something that the Alumni Association done their own. We didn't really know a lot about it. So it's hard to parse out who's at fault. I think if I'm being generous, I would say they dropped the ball on communicating to these guys exactly what was going to happen. And I think at the end of the day, Cam, this is just a PR move by them and saying like, well, we don't, because of some of the things that have gone on, post that era, we don't want to be associated with it publicly. So it's a bizarre thing because obviously there were a ton of great memories from that group and they don't feel like they're getting their due. And the university's been pretty quiet about it so far. There hasn't been an official response to some of the noise about, hey, you need to allow – there's a lot of guys on this team that contributed that don't have any sort of, issues.
Like most of them.
There. Yeah, right. Like
that's weird, man. Like that's a fumble on TCU's part, in my opinion. Like, because I talked about it this week. I did the whole Art Briles thing, why he's not going to be there. Like, no matter what you think about him, like, come on. Like, he's not going to be invited to that. And for TCU to do that, to basically say, we don't want Gary back, and one of our players got in trouble later. Like, that is weird. That is beyond bizarre to me. And I think that is a major fumble on TCU's part. And even now, like we're organizing recognition of teams at the same time. There's too much symmetry here. And the weirdest symmetry between these two teams this year is that it looked like we were both in the GJ Kinney sweepstakes. Like a month ago, both these coaches were fired. Like we were done. Both our collective fan bases were. Are they? Is Sonny Dykes not fired now? Is he completely unfired?
I would say yes. I mean, I think 6-6 is still kind of the magic number. I feel like they get there, but even if they melted down and finished 5-7, I feel like unless it was just a complete embarrassment where the games were competitive, they would stick with them for another year. The thing I'll say about Sonny that it's the most positive is the team obviously hasn't quit on him. Like I had the idea after the Houston game of like, okay, are we going to start seeing some real rough efforts from here forward? But they've rallied and found some ways to win. I think even with some of their flaws, not being able to run the ball super well, having some turnover issues, I will say they've made some adjustments schematically that have helped too. But they've found some workarounds over the last couple of weeks that give me promise. They also they've got a lot of people coming back for 2025. And so I think they feel like that's the year they're sort of building towards, and that'll sort of be like okay, it's put up or shut up time for him. I guess for Baylor, I was around when Chandler Morris twisted his knee and suddenly Max Duggan came in and took over and led that team to heights that we didn't think were possible in 2022. Is it as simple as Sawyer Robertson stepped in and has just been lighting it up when he wasn't expected to be the dude? Or has Dave Aranda and company done other things over the last few weeks that have given this team a lot of hope and promise?
It's a lot of Sawyer Robertson. It is. I mean, and I've given Dave praise over the last few weeks because I've had people ask me privately and publicly of like, yeah, but Cam, dude, like if they go 6-6, 7-5, you're keeping Dave Aranda. Like, do you want that again? And I'm like, look, if they do that, then yeah, it's not where we want to be ultimately, but coming back from 3-9 and potentially going 7-5, like that's a big jump. And it would show once again that these guys have not quit on their coach. And we look at the recruiting class again. Both these teams have a ton of recruiting momentum. And to your point, for Baylor as well, they keep a lot of the guys that are starring right now. Sawyer Robertson, Bryson Washington, Dawson Pendergrass. They've got all these guys in skill positions, Caden Jenkins, who have plenty of eligibility left. Like they're coming back. And to throw in another coach, it could be bad. Whereas the way that you've gained momentum from the end of this season going into the next, I think that's not a bad idea to keep on to Dave Aranda and Jake Spavital and a head recruiter like Keenan Hall. Like I would be in for that. And it's actually weirdly very similar to what I said about Sawyer Robertson before the year, which was because I was a DeQuan Finn guy. I really was. And I had said, if Sawyer, because the QB battle went so long, if Sawyer Robertson wins the starting job, it means he won the starting job. Doesn't mean DeQuan Finn necessarily lost it. He stinks and they both stink and you just have to find out which one stinks less. No, it would be like it's because Sawyer Robertson won the job. And that's kind of how I feel about if Baylor has a winning record this year, it's because they're playing for their coach. It's not, this is not something that's going to happen by mistake. Now, of course, there is the elephant in the room that Dave Aranda did not pick Sawyer Robertson to start this year. Right. And he has been such a revelation for them. But ultimately, it's the same thing with the NFL. If the quarterback's good, nothing else matters. Nothing. Nothing. I mean, I'm sure TCU fans were saying that in regards to Max Duggan and Sonny Dykes. If the quarterback's good, it does not matter. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby. It's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through those all-day tailgates, the touchdown celebrations, or that second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for you super fans, the fans who are first in the parking lot and last to leave. We see you Okay, you know what gives me a bit of Baylor fan fuel this week? It's going to be when the Bears take the field, big time night game in those anthracite uniforms. Fire me up. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help you fuel through this season. Who's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipping nationwide. And
I will say, I mean, I just as an outsider, when I heard about a quarterback battle between DeQuan Finn and Sawyer Robertson, I was like, okay, that just sounds like we're posturing for the media or some sort of competitive advantage. Like, I didn't think, from what I knew about who DeQuan Finn was and what allegedly they were paying him, I was like, this is silly that they would even entertain the notion of it. But I feel like in retrospect, obviously this coaching staff had some idea of like, no, this dude is good and he's pushing this guy that we thought was going to be the guy. And I mean, he got his chance and he ran with it. So I think that shows some foresight by them, even though it wasn't the path to him being the starter wasn't the traditional way, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. And it is worth noting too, different sort of circumstances, but they did bring in Sawyer Robertson in the portal too the year before. This is not just some kid they kind of took a waiver on out of, whatever, Wakeland High School. This is a guy they went and actively recruited out of the portal. Speaking of the coaches, we talked about how the head coaches were both fired a month ago. It seemed like last year, the offensive coordinator for TCU was hella fired. And when I was up in Fort Worth, there was a Fire Kendall shirt in the section in front of the press box. But the Frogs put up the point, Steven. Is that Kendall Briles, or is it the notion of doesn't matter if the quarterback's good?
I think Kendall deserves some credit for it. I mean, here's the thing with him in TCU. Sonny, so this is a fun conversation that happens, Cam. There's two camps about Kendall Briles. There's people that just don't like him because of his affiliation with Baylor previously, because of him being named in the Pepper Hamilton report for saying some pretty outrageous things to recruits, right? Because of like the fact that TCU fans for a long time kind of thought they held this moral superiority to Baylor people, and suddenly it's like, oh, we're just going to invite this person to come coach and our coaching staff. So maybe we're just, not as cool as we thought. And then there's those people who I think even if TCU put up like 50 points a game, they would still be like, I don't like this guy. And then there's another camp that seems to think that like any negative criticism of Kendall is like a weird culture war thing, and they're kind of like putting the cape on for him. And so it's like, no, I'm anti-cancel culture, which means also I have to support this person. And so it's just become this very odd dynamic amongst TCU fans. He makes some weird and odd play calls in situational moments. I think Baylor people would understand that and know that given his time there. Like the short yardage stuff is not great. Part of that's offensive line issues. Part of that is I just feel like he's not equipped to, run plays that work in those situations. He always has one or two kind of trick, funky, weird gadget things that don't seem to work exactly how you want them to. But by and large, I think he's found a way to make Josh Hoover effective. And I mean, the turnovers, I'm not going to put that completely on the OC. I guess you could argue if you have a QB who has a tendency to fumble the ball, maybe stop putting him in zone read situations if obviously he's not comfortable with that. But I mean, if I was going to give him a grade, I'd say he gets a B, and I think that's fine. Like, that's very serviceable. The issue for Sonny Dykes is you took a big gamble from like a goodwill perspective to bring this person on staff. And so if the results aren't just leaps and bounds better than people expected, or if it's just not obvious that like this offense is humming at such a great pace that, it's justified that he's there, then you're always going to have that chatter behind you. And they just go in lulls, man. Like there will be times where they'll score on like 3 consecutive drives, and it's just like, man, that's amazing. They look like one of the best offenses in the country. They look elite. And then they'll go 3 and out, or throw a pick, or have a fumble, or, stall out in the red zone, miss a field goal, and suddenly they put their defense in bad situations too. So it's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing. I feel like overall he's done a good job, though, with calling plays and with developing the QB, which is the position that he's tasked with the most. So I think he's doing well, but because of who he is, there's always going to be that kind of noise around him and his job performance.
And by the way, this TCU offense to me is fascinating because Hoover can chuck it, man. And he's got a real good core of receivers, like, for sure. And you kind of touched on it a little bit in there. It's like a margins thing, or like the things that the analytical stuff the coaches look at, right? They lose the turnover battle a lot. They have one of the worst turnover differentials in the Big 12. They're in the red zone. Mm-hmm. They're on third down, but they hit big explosives. And so obviously easier said than done, but if you take away explosives, it becomes tougher for this offense to kind of move down the field on you on a bend but don't break defense. And there are going to be points in this game. Baylor, 97 points in the last 2 games. You are looking at 2 quarterbacks of the future of the Big 12. And as good as we talked about how good the quarterbacks are going to be in this conference before this year. And Shedeur is obviously at that really high level. I think you make an argument for both of these guys to get all Big 12 nods. Like, genuinely. Rocco Becht, good player. Man, who wouldn't want Rocco Becht? Numbers don't jump off the page. Cam Rising not playing, Fafita step back. Could we see these guys on all Big 12 lists at the end of the year?
I think so. I mean, there was a time when Josh was putting up like those video game numbers each and every week, and it's kind of felt like it was a shoe-in. I think that's cooled off as the year's gone on. I'm really curious to see what Dave Aranda has cooked up. I know he likes to bring those disguised blitzes and simulated pressures, and how Hoover and this offensive line are able to adjust to that. But I think he's definitely got an argument to be, one of those all Big 12 guys. Like, he's been distributing the ball all over the field, making good decisions, making great plays. And Sawyer Robertson, again, like, you can't say enough about how he's kind of stepped in and turned the season around for Baylor and his ability to get it done. So, Cam,
yes,
what are the keys, brother? What's going to decide this football game on Saturday night, Saturday night, 7 p.m. kick. Yeah.
It's all right for fighting, just so you know. The simple answer is turnovers, which I do believe it is. I believe it is turnovers, because as much as TCU does turn it over, Baylor's not a team that is just like racked it up like they were a couple years ago, the take 3 stuff. They're not that. I think they've got a great pass rush when they want to do it. And that I think would lead to some turnovers against like you talked about, a fumble happy Josh Hoover. But with Baylor, it's been a pretty simple formula when you look at it. When they run the football effectively, they win. They score a lot of points and they win. And that's been paramount the last 2 weeks. They've rushed for 600 yards, basically. I think it was 597 in the last 2 weeks. So they're not necessarily like a run between the tackles team. Obviously, they love what they have at quarterback, and their quarterback's going to throw 2 or 3 touchdown passes every week, no matter what. But that's the formula. It's like the Celtics, dude. The Celtics have the best offense like ever, but when they're playing defense to start a game, they're going to win that game. That's Baylor, man. Great passing offense, great quarterback, but if they're running the ball effectively, they are going to at least have a chance and probably win that game by the numbers that we've seen this year, because they were scoring some of those in the 30s even when they weren't running the ball, but they weren't winning. So, Steven, that is mine. How do you see this Horned Frog attack? How do they get away with a victory? I know it's been a lot the last decade, but I think you need to do more than just put on the TCU uniform and kick off against Baylor.
Whoa. Don't discount just putting on the TCU uniform.
Damn it.
Well, I think quietly they've rushed the passer a lot better over the past couple of weeks. That's made a huge difference in the defensive side of the ball. So, Sawyer Robertson, I know he's probably a better athlete than people think, They probably don't see him as dual threat, but I feel like getting him off his spot and making him make plays outside the pocket, off schedule, is going to be a huge key. Yes, protecting the ball, playing a clean football game. I've said it for 8 weeks. I'll say it again. They need to do it. Like, they have to find a way to play complementary football together. And finally, Savion Williams. So Savion's been a guy around for a couple of years. And it's always been like, man, this dude, he looks the part. Like, they just need to find a way to unleash him and get his production to a place where he's consistently making plays. Well, last couple of weeks, Wild Frog package, Wildcat, like they line him up at quarterback, they line him up in the backfield. He's been running the ball well. He's 6'5", 225. He's just got that ability to kind of work his way through contact, get those tough yards. So if he can continue to run the ball well, control the clock, I think that'll be really good for this TCU team as well. And, Cam, I mean, over the past 9 years, there have been many times where I've thought, Baylor week, like, this Baylor team is just better. TCU is not going to pull this off, or vibes are bad, like team's in a bad way. But it's only happened once. Like, the TCU is taking care of business, whether it was walk-off field goals, blowout victories. Chandler Moore is having an out-of-body experience at Amon G. Carter Stadium for 4 hours and defeating a very, very good Baylor team. So I think that's the key. You just have to remember that Baylor is cursed against TCU.
I took my headphones out for that. I didn't catch any of it. So I don't know what you said. If it's something along the lines of TCU beats Baylor a lot, I don't know what to tell you. I tuned it out. There's no better time than the present. And the second best time is the future. You know what Tony said? You know what Tony Soprano said? Remember when is the lowest form of conversation. I'm throwing that at you, Steven Simcox. This is a new era. And I'm going to throw out a score prediction. I'm going to ask you for yours. There is going to be points. Okay, this is not one of those games where you're like, oh, it's going to be 45-42, and it ends up being 19-16. No, this is going to be 35-31 in favor of the Baylor Bears.
Oh, do you always do impressions, or is that just something
that wasn't even my best Tony, dude? Like, that really was not. I don't know. I don't always do impressions. Bafangul, I could do better.
The Gabagool. I think that's my the Gabagool. That's my one reference there. I think the Frogs win.
I like some pulp. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think the Frogs win. Hot take.
Wow.
But I do think this will be a close game. I think it'll be a great game. I'm expecting a good atmosphere. I know there are a lot of Baylor people that this era of football they're celebrating is like the peak of their fandom. And I think that there'll be a lot of juice in McLean Stadium. I know TCU fans will laugh about that when they hear it, but I believe it's going to be a good atmosphere because of all those reasons. I think ultimately the way the Frogs have played the last couple of weeks, they're going to be able to score enough. Defense will get enough stops. Man, I'm so good at just breaking down a game with generic phrases there.
You do too many of these coaches shows. You and I do these coaches shows, the 2-minute high school coaches shows, that just becomes your vernacular.
Give me TCU 41-38, game-winning field goal on a day where Baylor fans celebrate the time where they beat TCU on a walk-off field goal in the game that I don't remember, but I heard was very, very good.
Yeah, I was thinking of adding 20 points to each for your score prediction.
Think
about it.
The worst part of that, not the worst part of it, because the worst part of it was I think that TCU team actually had a chance to win a national title, and that kept them from doing it. But the second worst part is that game was so good, and I can't watch it. Like, I never get to revisit it. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, like, Cam Eccles-Looper, a TCU wide receiver, he had like the best pass I've ever seen from a receiver. Like, he hit BJ Catalon on a wheel route on a dime, like 40 yards down the field. And it's like the 10th best play of the game. Like, it was just two teams.
Like, it might get cut from some of the shorter highlight videos.
Yes. It was just two teams putting on fireworks for 4.5 hours because all the TV timeouts and all the points. And I I don't revisit it, and I never will. So,
God, those were a ton of fun. Those were the days, man. Those were the absolute days. That's Steven Simcox, Locked On Horned Frogs. I'm Kim Stuart, Locked On Baylor. We'll both, I guess, be previewing a little bit more as we count down to kickoff. We'll get you ready for Saturday night. Best believe it. Steven, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you as always.
Thank you, Cam.
Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We will see you tomorrow on our respective shows. This has been a Locked On Horned Frogs, Locked On Baylor crossover.